All right, guys, we are live. We are back on the Pat Stedman podcast. This is episode 2. We're going to be talking about modern dating and traditional gender roles today with Trina Nuance. Trina is going to be. You guys maybe remember. It's been a minute since I've been doing shows. This is, like I said, number 2. But before I went to prison, I was doing all sorts of interviews, and I had 2 really great ones with Trina. And I'm really happy to have her on. She's gonna be coming on here a lot, and she's doing her own show too. So we're gonna be like doing some back and forth stuff on this. But yeah, Trina, it's great to have you on here. You
So great to see that. Yeah. I want everyone to know that I busted in with this. I was like, I want to talk to Pat again publicly about this crazy world and welcome him back to the world. And the first initial conversation we had back in the day, I think it was at least a year ago, was on Pat's channel. Interviewing me, and it was such a great conversation. I've revisited it multiple times. And then our second conversation was right before you went into prison. Yeah. And I was on my host, and I did it so silly. I was using this platform called Whereby to host it. Anyways, the file hasn't been on public yet, but as your audience is probably aware, you have, this great important element of being a man that you help people with, but you're also kind of can transcend it, and you have access to this whole like the spiritual world and things, but it's really at odds on some level, some would say, from some views. So I really want to re-engage with that and talk about it publicly. And I told Pat I'm willing to not only talk about other people's experiences, but I want to like volunteer as tribute, because I never really talk about my firsthand experiences. I think Pat is a great person to like discuss with that, and also say like, oh, what has my experience been? And I'm kind of down in this place where I'm down to be open about that and use myself also for us to discuss these things people go through in their dating and relationship lives, both first and second person, and just as concepts. So
yeah, likewise. We can get a little personal here. So this whole idea of like, this is like a big, I appreciate this was your topic idea, but it's such a great topic idea, because this is like a huge dissonance that I see people have today, because you have like people want to be trad, but we don't live in a trad world unless you're in like a really micro community. Like, you're not in a trad world, and we've been programmed with all sorts of other things. There's the job market. Women are in the job market. Everybody's out there and they're dating. So how do you bring this trad element to dating and to a relationship? How do you manage it in, what is essentially a secular world? So I think this is going to be a fun conversation to talk about it, because I know I've gone through this through personal experience. And I think, where we're going to get to in here to some extent is some of this, there's some things I think that are immutable about the dynamics between men and women, like things that men and women like. And I think that there's a lot of feedback that directed a lot of what gender roles were based on just sort of natural, not only like natural, like what's the word I'm looking for in economic terms, like comparative advantage, right? In terms of one being maybe a little bit more, good at it than the other, but also like from a sexual appealing dynamic. But I think we're also getting to a point where you can't be too rigid on these things as well. So take it away, Trina. I mean, tell me a little bit. What do you think? What do you think is going on here? How do you think we manage this?
I think so. There's 2 ways you can kind of be. Okay, first of all, we're not dealing with the same world. I feel like I said that before, but you have these sets of people. Some of them are very into the whole idea of traditional gender roles, which is obviously correct to a very large extent. But since we're not living in the same world, you can get to certain points in the process, whether you're like dating and trying to decide if like they're your person, or you are trying to reconcile what you are attracted to and what you feel like would be the right thing to do, whether it's socially the right thing to do or like longevity the right thing to do. I think this is happening on both the men's and the women's side. And you throw into the mix the fact that women make their own money. Men have emotions that they need to address or work through. And that underneath the surface of like roles that people fit in, there becomes this very broad set of new problems that everybody's trying to navigate with, whether it's in dating or whatever. So I think it's really helpful to clarify, like, what would you even say is, if you were to say like the beginning lens of assessing that, is it just, oh, I need to have exact clarity around what I want? Or is it, because I almost feel like I'm such a C for myself as learner. Anything I've been curious on, like, let me just dive in, right?
Yeah.
And then learn and then deal with whatever I was wrong with or whatever was bad, and then take that lesson and then move on to the next. And that's really never done me wrong. But in a traditional sense, that has led to me having multiple relationships, right? And dating multiple people. And if you're a guy like dating me and I have all this life experience, that's not very red pill, right?
Yeah.
And I think that the whole world, I'm not the only one, right? Women have traveled, they have had jobs, they've had relationships. So if you're the man who's either doesn't care about the things that we should care about traditionally, then that can be a liability. But also if you're the man who does care about it, then you can also get in your own way.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just such a difficult, it can be a difficult thing to ask of both sides to navigate. Yeah.
Well, let me, I think I know how we can kind of springboard this off, because I think that there's a stuff that, and I'm going to talk about this from the guy's perspective for women, and maybe you can
Talk about
throw it in the opposite direction. Yeah. But, we're told as men today that, because everybody's equal, you should be valuing a woman based on, the job that she has, right? That's something that's supposed to be appealing. And, like based on the intelligence, and based on, the fact that like person to person. So it's like almost anything that a man would be assessed for should also go into the basket for a woman. And I found like this is very mixed in reality. So, and like, because the traditional thing is that the woman's going to be valuable to the guy. And I'm not even just talking about like off the front end in terms of like attractiveness. She's going to be valuable because she is physically attractive, because she's feminine, because she's classy, but also, if we're being honest, also like good in bed, or able to like really takes care of the guy. So kind of tries to make the house a home for him, has like this nurturing, feeds him, and etc. So this has been really interesting for me, because I like, and I actually am writing an email about this to, or at least I'm addressing some of this in an email. It's not what the email is about, but my wife and I kind of have this like hybridized modern trad relationship, because she's, she's a very intelligent, and she's, I don't like, she's accomplished. I'm not gonna say like she's accomplished, like her work is her life, like accomplished, but she's got a solidly paying job, right? She's very good at her job. She's a very, very competent person. And and but she's also, and we've been moving in this direction over time towards, that she's cooking, that there's a lot like that, like she makes the house into a home, like everything's kind of taken care of. Like there's this moving, like we've played around with a lot of this stuff, you know what I mean? Like almost coming into it with somewhat neutral roles, and then moving more towards trad roles. And what I've found is that I really respect her. I respect her competence, and I think it's a great trait in a wife to have a woman who, is strong and is able to stand on her own 2 feet and can get things done, and isn't like in her head and freaking out, and you know what I mean? So I really admire that about her. And I'm really grateful for her intelligence too, because I can have conversations with her, and and she can point out when something doesn't make sense sometimes. Even, I mean, it's true. Sometimes she's a very very common sense person, right? She can cut very logical, can cut the core of things. But from like a polarity standpoint within the relationship, like that makes me like respect her as a human being and
Right.
as a partner. But from like the sexual standpoint, from like the polarity dynamic, like what's the vibe between us, I have to acknowledge that it's much more about, you know, when she's flirting and she's able to, and being like receptive, right? And when, she makes a meal and gives, when she brings me things, right, to eat, when I find that like shit has been like cleaned up and taken care of and everything is organized, like the laundry's, you know what I mean? Like this kind of stuff, like it charges me differently on a level, and it brings the relationship up. So I think this is kind of interesting. Um, and it's not to say that like everything has to be in that realm, because you have like, I think it's a very crass way of saying it, but there's that old expression like, you keep his belly full and his balls empty. You don't have to, but there is something to that with
Yeah.
men. I'm almost like embarrassed about how simple I am to please.
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
um and the rest of it is kind of like icing on the cake. And I think as long as that fundamental stuff is taken care of, then there's a lot more room in the relationship for other types of roles to happen. You know what I mean? Like
This
that we don't
points to
have
a really that no, that points to a really good bottleneck because you almost sound like you're illustrating like the development of a dynamic,
yeah,
right? And if I think about things that people come to me with in my online and my offline world in their different dating lives, and my own also, one of those can be like you don't let the dynamic develop in that kind of organic way you're narrating. You don't have that respect for both the things that fall within the role and the things that fall without. So it can't really find its place, right? Because here we're talking about, like, for example, I'm like, I can be very masculine, assertive, direction, da da da, lead my own life, and very like hold my own. But within a dynamic with a man, I actually part of what's part of what a woman feels like she's a prize in a generic, typical, stereotypical sense is, oh, I'm pretty and whatever. But in my brain, like in relation to a man, I think that's part of being the prize is that the thing that would maybe be seen as degrading, which is you know I'm cleaning. I'm good at cleaning. I'm good at cooking. I'm pretty. I'm on your arm. Like whatever. Those are part of the prize as well. Whereas I feel like women have view those things as mutually exclusive, right? It's a,
yeah,
oh yeah, I want you to lead the way and pay for my stuff and da da da. But I want to only give you sex whenever I feel like it, and I don't want to care about like whether you're fed, and I don't want to clean. I'm dirty, da da da. Right? Like these mutually exclusive things. So maybe those are roadblocks for us to kind of put out on the table for anyone listening to this is like the dynamic can't develop if you have an aversion to even either, right? It's not, maybe we're revealing it's not about just conforming to the role and it's not about rejecting where somebody's at and what they come with. It's kind of seeing how those things can take steps together or not.
well,
Does that make
yeah, and
sense?
I think a lot of the problem for women is the ego around the fact that they've been brought up to view the things that get men as being demeaning to them,
Hmm.
and these other things, that this is the stuff that really makes them more valuable individuals. And I think sometimes maybe it does make them a more valuable, sometimes it makes them a more valuable individual, but what makes you a valuable individual doesn't necessarily make you more valuable on the sexual marketplace. And I think I see women who don't have the hangups, like it's almost like you have to. you have to anchor yourself in, well, what is your objective here? So like if a woman says like, my objective is to get this kind of man and to be treated this way by this kind of man, right? Then you have to follow that objective where it leads, right? You have to in what sort of behavior it entails. And I think that we're, you know, we kind of get at loggerheads at men and women in this whole space, is that, you know, it's not, and I said this before, but I want to reiterate, it's like, it's not that I don't appreciate and value my wife for being competent and intelligent. I really value her for that stuff. I think that made her way more wife material than another girl, right? But the things within our marriage that increase like the attraction and, you know, passion are not those things. So those are, they're like, so it doesn't, so it's like the weight of my heart was not those things.
Yeah.
Right. And I think it's like, for a lot of women, that's a difficult thing, because they associate, well, the way to a man's heart is for me to demean myself. And I don't view it as being demeaning. And I think that's like a program that's been put in women's minds that have created some issues with it. I am curious though, what is it? So, you know, what is the female corollary to that with men? Like, what are women looking for in a guy?
It's literally just pointing to the classic like shit test, right? Like, I'm thinking of a very specific instance. I was out with a couple girls I work with. One of them is into this guy. I promise I'm answering your question. And causing a lot of resistance. And I'm like giving her shit as her like friend, because I think he's a great guy. But who cares, right? Like, I'm just like, what are you doing? Like, he's great. And she's like, no, fuck this, like that. And I think like if we were to put it in like red pill terms, it'd be like she's kind of shit testing him, because the minute he decided to like make a decision and lead the way, like, we're doing this, she was like receptive to it, even though she was verbalizing, like giving him a hard time, playing hard to get, or whatever it was. And on another end of that, where like somebody might be like me, like if my scenario is, oh, I'm interested in this guy, I want to see where it goes, and I'm definitely just going to be like, you know, oh, maybe, oh, we're going to meet up. Maybe we're going to go here. Maybe we're going to go there. Whereas me, maybe I might lean into more the, oh, I'm going to like have direction or whatever it is, and not give you as hard of a time. But it's funny, because I think what those both speak to, even though they're opposite ways, is it's almost like because I've gone down the path of like doing that and then been like a little bit upset that I'm the one who can do that, right? So then that creates that dynamic of maybe the woman leading. And I think even in that scenario, it's leads you to a place where he needs to step up and be the leader in this traditional role. But also at the same time, I've had experiences where at the beginning of it, they find me in this leadership or work role or whatever it is, and it's something that's intriguing versus, you know, a hypothetical comparison where she's just, oh, la, 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 like woman, receptive, da, da, da. So I'm sorry that's not really fully answering, but I think for women, they're looking for, I think it's a combination of, I want to be appreciated and accepted for these qualities that I've formed in the modern world. And I also need you to be that role that is just tried and true. It's just part of our biology. Right. And I think the entry point can vary. But no matter what somebody's attitude about it is in the dating atmosphere, the woman is always kind of looking for, you know, I don't think like a huge issue that I've talked shit about in the online world. You can't shame women into these, no matter what our conclusions are about what women need to do now, you can't shame them into this, right? Whether she's a total whore and she's just like blah, blah, or she's total wife, like whatever it is, we can't be, that's not the way to push us towards progress and being that like co-captain or ride shotgun in the way that you want us to, right? So then the question becomes, if you meet this more masculine energy or this more resistant energy or this more or this more like soft feminine energy, maybe not as smart, maybe can't like intellectual or whatever it is with you, how do you reconcile and lead and appreciate that? I think women are just looking for that you know, it's like the feminine group of personal development we've talked about. Masculine development, which I've participated in a ton, is very like, you know, action, clarity, solution, kind of give you a hard time, push you, like, da da da. And then feminine is very accepting. We're all like, I love you for who you are, blah, blah. So I think that you can't really, I think when you're trying to be a leader, you can't lose that. You can't lose the, oh, reinforce and like pour water on the flower type thing.
Yeah.
Right. Women are looking, we need that no matter what.
Yeah. I think it's something that guys really, really struggle with to internalize when it comes to guiding, you know, a woman in a direction that you want, how you want her behavior to change. You can't like women, the feminine, especially because like they want the woman to be more feminine. The feminine grows on praise, not criticism. Now, I understand the difficulty here is that sometimes, you know, the truth is also necessary in order for there to, you know, the masculine has to create truth and clarity in order for change to occur. And to a woman whose behavior is, you know, incongruent with truth, then a comment could feel like criticism to her. Right. So, and I think to some extent, you know, for a woman to become really like a balanced whole individual, she's going to have to be okay with receiving some degree of constructive criticism. But the main thing with this is that if you want her to change, I think that you can do it. And I actually think it makes more sense to do it even from the perspective of the guy, even putting aside how women's, you know, brain or energetic is wired to, and I tweeted about this the other day, was that you want more of them. Like, I think for women, when it's like, you're not doing this, you're not doing this, you're not, it's like you're bad, you're dysfunctional, you're, you know, you're inadequate for me. And that brings a woman down. And the best you're going to get from a woman in response to that sort of comment is if she may chase after you and try to like mold herself into something perfect in the short term to get you or to try to please you. But it's a really like neurotic, desperate, in fact, frankly, kind of fake femininity that like, you know, she's just trying to be good enough for you. But then, you know, eventually it'll exhaust her, or it'll exhaust you too, because you're dealing with all of her like neediness and baggage. Whereas I think if you really care about a woman, like you tell her like, this makes me want you more. Like when you do this, this makes me feel so connected to you. This makes me like crave you even more. So it's like you're anchoring it like, here's your way to get more and more and more of my love and desire, which is what you want. It's not that you're not good enough. It's that you're not giving me enough of you. I think that's a very different way of putting it. Yeah, go ahead.
That brings such a good point too, because earlier you mentioned respect.
Yeah.
And I think that dynamic can go in a bad direction. The difference between that going in a bad direction and like maybe a manipulative direction and it going in a potential to grow into a good dynamic is respect, right? Because if she respects you, then she does naturally feel like making you happy and she wants to be chosen and she wants to do these things. But if she doesn't, as an underpin, like gold backed respect thing, then that might be something she takes and uses to get what she wants only, right? Like when things are going good and then I know that I can act like this and whatever. Or maybe when I don't want to fulfill my role for you, I can just use it as an excuse and know like how it is. So then my question for you would be like, how would you advise a man to assess whether a woman respects him without getting caught in this whole, she didn't do what I say, so then this is no. Like, what does that look like today?
Well, I think a lot of it depends on whether she's what she's trying to get from you, because manipulative women will, you know, women who know how to, and let's put, also, I just want to say for the record, guys are so desperate for femininity. A lot of them like don't care about being manipulated. like they're like, yeah, you can, you know, and I think that's also a
I could
lot of
say the same
reasons.
for women. I could say the same for women.
Yeah. I mean, but it's not good. It's not a good thing in the long term to get yourself
No.
involved with that. But that's why it continues to work, because they're really starved of it. So you want to see like, what is she? What are you actually getting fulfilled from it? You know what I mean? Like what are you like, if you do this, like, you know, she acts really feminine and everything, and she says, you know, she wants something from you. Well, what does she want from you? You know, I you know, this is like a lot of the stuff that like gold diggers do. They'll do that to get a lot of money from a guy. You know, they're going to be sweet to him only if he buys her this or that. And it's beyond like a little cute thing. You know, it gets to be quite extravagant sometimes. And there's really and what you see is that there's a lack of gratitude really at the end of it all. They'll put it on for you when they want something up front, you know, but especially you can see the pattern of it over time. Really, what you want to see from a woman is that she enjoys making you happy. You know what I mean? Like she enjoys the fact that you enjoy her. And I think that this is something that both sexes, I mean, they do it in different ways, but I think it's something that both sexes feel like completely the same way about. Like a guy is gonna feels like nothing is. This is another thing. Like there's a great it's a great account on Twitter, like Layla Thomasone, and she talks about this stuff. But like, it's amazing how guys just want to know that the things that they're doing are making their, you know, their wife or their girlfriend happy. Like the things that they're doing, like the effort that they put into it. Like women can get guys to do a lot of things and make them really happy with it if they just showed like more appreciation and gratitude. And I think this is like a lot of guys feel like taken for granted. I mean, I know women feel taken for granted too. Don't get me wrong. Like I think it's a problem between both sexes. But
No,
this is a
you are.
real, when
Yeah.
you see so much of this resentment online, it's like a lot of these guys are like, I work, you know, I did all this stuff right, quote unquote. I mean, they didn't do everything right, but I did everything right, and it was never appreciated. The effort was never appreciated, and women just being like so enthusiastic about a guy's wins, it makes guys like want to do so much more. Like they want to work so much harder as a result.
I
And
think from
I
a
think,
guy's
yeah, and I think that's when a woman, you know, and I know you've talked about the idea of being a muse before. Like I think this is when a woman starts to step into that muse energy, where like she becomes the inspiration for a guy's action. And I think to a certain extent, a woman who doesn't feel like she can inspire a guy's action, and so she has to resort to nagging, I think part of her feels like she's not attractive enough to do it. Like I think that there's a self-esteem issue almost on the part of the woman, because a woman who truly feels like she's beautiful and valuable herself, and she can trust in that. She can trust in that's going to spur a man forward, because what man is not going to move mountains for her?
That's a really, I like what you said there. It reminded me of I was in a like a big group dynamic for New Year's Eve, and the next day, one of the guys who like paid for a part of the table or whatever was like, "Hey, thanks for being the only one to say thank you." And I was like, "Duh, like you just
Yeah.
spent that was expensive. We were in like a more expensive area of Florida," and second after that, you said something about the guy checking for gratitude. And I think about guys I've known who've told me about dates that they've been on where they don't want to be the guy who, you know, doesn't. There's also the guy who doesn't want to like not pay and have it and like expects a thank you. So then what is the practical expression of that look like? I think maybe you're, and tell me if I'm wrong, as you as the guy who coaches guys, like does that from an internal standpoint, his compass needs to be like, oh, you need to make sure to like look for that and you with yourself deciding like what, like being present and conscious enough to recognize whether you're actually getting that. And if you aren't, that's not okay. And that's not at odds with you being willing to do that as a guy. Right. If we're talking cues of developing something with somebody you're interested in.
Yeah. I think this is good because you're pulling us back on track to the topic that we wanted to make this about. We knew this is going to happen.
I'm doing that.
Which is like, I think in a great way to sort of, you know, this is a typical dilemma in the modern dating space of, you know, who pays on the date, like what, and what's the sort of proper etiquette with that. And look, I think that, you know, some people, they want to go Dutch. They want to, each person pays their half. Okay, you can do that if you want. But I'm just gonna tell you, as a coach and just as a man, I think that's really unsexy to do that.
Let's go there. Cause I just experienced that in one of my last relationships.
Yeah. I don't like it. And I don't like it for a couple of reasons. There's the obvious baseline one, which is that it's not sexy. It affects the polarity of a dynamic from the beginning, because what you're basically saying is everybody's really neutral here. We're both neutral. We're both equals. So it's a very like feminist way of going about doing things. So whenever I hear like red pill guys complain about women not being feminine, complaining about all the, you know, masculinity crisis, and then they're like, women got to pay their half. I'm like, you guys are totally like, you have no self-awareness whatsoever, because the only way to break these dynamics is to not behave according to them. Now, I understand you don't want to get taken advantage of, but you have to, I would view all this stuff as a test to see what kind of woman you're dealing with here. So when you pay for the first date, you don't have to have an extravagant first date anyway. But when you pay for the date, what you're looking for is, you know, I think like either of these are good signs. She tries to pay or tries to contribute and you say no, right? But the fact that she tried to contribute, I think it's good. It shows good faith on her end. It shows, you know, that she doesn't want to take advantage of you. So that's a good sign. And if she doesn't try to pay, but she's really grateful and appreciative, that's also great, because then she's showing that she's comfortable in this polarity. You're probably dealing with a more feminine woman or a woman who's more comfortable using feminine power if she doesn't like offer to pay. But I don't think either of them are bad, right?
I think you're pointing at the same thing you pointed out before. I don't know if that's just me, but I think that, I don't know why this is a pattern arising. I'm just gonna let it flow. I agree with you, because I think where it's coming from matters, right? She can like offer to pay kind of just as like I don't want to feel bad, or she can just offer to pay because like she cares that you're like providing or whatever it is. But I've also had a front row seat to situations where they're not really offering to pay.
Yeah.
Like they're offering because they like when the immediate social rhetorical situation, it's like, oh, I'll pay. Oh, okay, good. You pay. You know, yeah. And I think it ties back to what you said earlier about like respect. Like, is she actually like respecting you in the dynamic at that point? Because where it comes from informs what that even means.
Yeah. And so I think a lot of like, is she really appreciative about it? And,
yeah,
you know, how is she, like, if a girl who just kind of just like expects it, but not only just expects it, but like doesn't, they're like, it's almost like she's still not rewarding within the dynamic. She's still not, I think it's a bad sign. I think it's definitely a bad sign. You want to see like a real like graciousness and appreciation from a woman if you do it. And some women, you know, they want to pay, and they might actually be like, no, like I want to do it, like we should split. The way that I ended that, and the way I, you know, and it worked really well. And I think this is a great thing also when we talk about the context of, you know, we're in the modern era, you know, women are making money too. I'll say, you can pay next time, but I got it this time. And I like that, because what you're trying to establish here is a high trust dynamic. I think when like you're splitting everything down the middle, that's not how That's not how like close individuals behave with each other. That you're saying a transactional dynamic when we're like good friends and family. It's supposed to be a reciprocal dynamic where you pay for something, it's like socialism almost, you know what I mean? And that's in that environment. And really it's supposed to be in that close knit environment because it's high trust. It's different trying to make socialism in a structure with low trust, but in a high trust, close connected dynamic, that's the way it's supposed to be. So
that's such a good point. I've never drawn that parallel before. It's almost like you're illustrating like relational like karma. Like I know that like, if I do good for you, you're going to do good for me. We're just keep doing good for each other.
This is it. I mean, so and this especially comes into play like if you were dating a woman, let's say, who was making really good money. I think that there is some degree of an expectation that she's at least going to be taking, if she's making around the same amount of money as you, she should, in the aggregate, you shouldn't be paying substantially more than her. You should probably be paying, between 50 and 60% of everything in this. It's enough to create some degree of polarity in leading. But the way you do it is that when you take her out someplace, you pay for it. When, maybe she invites you to go someplace and she pays for something. And that's really the way to do it. You're looking for that kind of reciprocity, that kind of generosity. I do think if you're dealing with a woman who's making a lot of money and she's never offering to pay, I do think that is I think it's a red flag personally, even if she's behaving in a feminine dynamic, because I think, it's not, if she knows she's making more than you, or at least making the same as you, and she's acting that way, that there's like it just doesn't seem, it seems like
some sort of balance that's off.
Yeah, there's something that's off.
I'm gonna begin volunteering as tribute. So something that I really struggled with was in somebody that I dated last year was that, because on one level, I honestly don't know how close in proximity we were to what we make. But you could gather that, they were in proximity, and very gentleman, very like paid for the first date, et cetera, et cetera. And then I would like steal the date when he's in the bathroom and stuff like that. So I'm gonna curse.
Mm-hmm.
But then like further along in dating, there arose these situations where I noticed like honestly, I wasn't really confronting it. I was kind of avoiding it because I didn't like it. That there was a little bit of a lifestyle gap. Mm-hmm. Like I really like I eat from home 99% of the time. And like I save so much on groceries and I'm always talking about it. But then like if I go out to eat, like I don't even think about the bill.
Yeah.
Right. So, and I noticed that I know that about myself because I grew up in like my mom's like bougie fine dining industry. So then it arose this dynamic. Like we took our first trip together and I'm like paying for anything that's like nice when we're going out to eat, because I know that's me bringing that to the dynamic. Whereas we're like, let's find the cheapest bar in town, always have 50-cent beers. And I love that. And we would generally enjoy those experiences together. But when it's time for me to enjoy my thing, there was like some shame there. So I almost brings into the question of like just an awareness of, and there were good and bad things of, those ways of navigating it. But it's like both sides have to be aware of, if you're spending money through somebody else's money, that is happening.
Yeah.
Is that a dog?
This is this like printer. I'm like about to.
Oh, it's okay.
Drive me crazy. It's just because it's going like dude.
Laser.
My dad's printing his Clan Campbell journal, it looks like, and there's all sorts of photos and stuff. Anyway, this is ridiculous, but I'm listening. Continue what you're saying.
That's so cool. Yeah, I mean, what is it? Just an awareness. I want to draw a parallel for the woman too, right? Like as the woman, if you're going to be G-checking yourself for being respectful or grateful, or being just a level of conscientious around, you are spending money through somebody else's bank account, whether you're an earning woman or not, that is something to be aware of. As the man, there's also this, you're being provided for, right? As a man, you're also being like validated as a man and or like nourished through like a woman's like sanctity a little bit, you know?
Yeah.
Like, does that make sense? The parallel I'm trying to draw?
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. It makes
Like,
perfect sense.
so I think that both sides need to know what's happening through what, because on the girl side, it can be like, oh, maybe she's taking advantage, gold digger, blah, blah, or disrespecting me as like making the same as me and not contributing, or making more than me and like emasculating me, or making less than me and just like sugar daddying it up. And then for the guy, it's the same. It's like, oh, you know, I can take these actions and I don't feel like I'm being provided for. I feel like I'm validating who I am as a man and leading and accomplishing,
Well,
but it's still happening through another energy.
well, yeah, this is like the balance. It's dealing with the practicalities of the situation while also trying to maintain the correct polarity and dynamic going on. And so I think the reason why, let's say like a woman who's making substantially more money than the guy, um, not paying for anything is a problem, is because, you know, yeah, she's the woman and she wants to feel like taken care of, but there's a real discrepancy in the reality of the situation. Like it's almost like because the money creates a real tangible dynamic. You can't, like, this stuff is like what she's doing, what she's asking for is like fake. Like it's not. She has to allow there to be like have tribute paid to that dynamic and to allow the polarity to be established without without being kind of like autistic about it, you know. And the way that is that you would let him take her out and pay for things, but they were not going to be as fancy. But if she wanted to go to something fancy, she would pay for it herself. She would do that and not put it on him as an expectation, because it would make him feel, you know, because otherwise you get into the situation where he's only going to be able to take you to cheaper things, or you're going to like break him trying to make it pay for like, so you either don't get to experience anything, you know, particularly on your level, let's put it that way. Things that you want to do you can't do because you can't afford it, or you put him in a situation where you really make him feel like insecure and anxious because he has to try to spend money that he really doesn't have. And that's
Yeah.
sort of low trust. That's sort of like that's not, if you actually care about this person, you're not going to put him in that situation. So I think it's a lot of the balance there. Um, and this calibrates, of course, in the other direction. Like when I was in my, you know, mid-20s, and I sometimes was dating college girls, like I was never making them pay for things. Like I let them pay for coffee, you know what I mean? I let them pay for ice cream, but like you know, I wouldn't let them pay for anything of any substance, because that was, you know, it wasn't, they couldn't afford that. I was the one who I had a decent job. I'd take them out. And that worked, of course, really well with the polarity dynamic because, you know, I was the guy. But I think that's like, you have to look at it. If you look at things instead of in this, you know, materialist, who's getting what, you know what I mean? Like, am I getting what's mine, like down to like the penny? And instead you look at it from the perspective of, what is the trust dynamic between the two of us? Is there proper reciprocity? Then I think if you look at it through that lens, that's actually how you start to establish like a good relationship across the board. And, you know, I think those girls also show their appreciation because, okay, you take her to a nice place. Well, she can't pay for it, but she's going to dress really nice. You know, she's going to show up in a way that makes you like happy that you took her out for dinner. You know what I mean?
Yeah. 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 No, that's really good. And yeah, I
And,
mean,
and
it's a level of contribution to what's being experienced.
And there's one more thing, and I think this is what happens when you get a little bit further along. But I know this is something that that my wife and I have done, and that kept the polarity with it, because when my wife and I were first dating, we made about the same amount of money. I think actually towards right before she came to the States, she may have even made a little bit more than me. Not a lot more, but like a little bit more. But what happened was, you know, as we started to get more serious, she basically gave me the authority over the money, the collective money. So it's like I would make decisions for us about what we were doing.
See, not all women could do that.
No, not all women could do that, but she did, and I think it was a great thing because, you know, like I've always been like transparent about my marriage. Like, you know, we definitely went through, like I've talked about it. Like we went to a point where we almost got to the brink of divorce, right? Our marriage is phenomenal now. I mean, it's gotten so good over the years, but I say this to say that, you know, we've certainly fought. Like we've certainly had friction on topics, and, you know, we're continuing to move forward, and sometimes there's still some friction. But I can tell you one topic that we have never had any issues on, and it's kind of crazy because, especially considering like what happened to me over the last few years. I mean, you know, depending on how you want to calculate my damages like like get close to like $1 million from all the January 6th stuff. Like it's substantial amount of money lost because of this whole process, both in terms of opportunity costs, legal fees, et cetera, et cetera. We have never had any issues about money. We've never once had a money issue in the entire course of the relationship.
I love that because she's, you know, it's decentered in terms of what needs to be done for her, it sounds like, you know?
Yeah.
Like, even
Yeah.
though it's a really important thing between you, you're married, you have a family together, you're going through all this shit that costs a lot of money. Like, it seems like the way she navigates it, even when she was at the beginning and now, it's what needs to be like done in this like unit, right? And not just like how much is there, how much does there need to be paid, blah, blah, which is really, really cool. And I think women need to hear that. I think that's it's also, let's not forget to mention that both of you guys is like egos are it's such partnerships in this dynamic, right? Like for example, in my little thing anecdote that I just gave, I think it was really conflicting.
Mm-hmm.
Not for me. Like I think it
Yeah.
was really hard because it's not like I don't think, I mean, this was never said, so I could be totally whatever. But in my I almost felt like at a certain point, because I kept starting to compensate that way, because I felt like that was, I mean, I got some validation here because it was like, oh, that's like the right thing to do. Similarly, right? If we're saying that's true, then it became a point where it's almost like that was both embraced and rejected because maybe he wanted to be able to um contribute those things or like I don't know what it was, or maybe it was just a lifestyle gap, I don't know, but my point is like underpinning the actions you take with those tools such as money or whatever it is, and to avoid issues and conflict arising from those things, it has to be like oh, this is what I have and this is what you have and this is what we're coming together with and sharing, and these are the different elements in it, and that's just what it is, and that's separate from what I would or not like my stuff to be or your stuff to be or our stuff to be.
Well, yeah, and I think I think part of the reason, I'd have to ask her, but I think part of the reason that she was willing to, you know, operate as if her money was our money was because I also wasn't I was always operating in good faith when it came to money. You know what I mean? Like I was always I was never doing like the penny pinching. I was never counting how much. So and I think this is something that a lot of guys, you know, if you want to get a girl's money, this is how you do it. No, but
Yeah.
um
No, okay, can we be really candid and raw with that? I agree. And
yeah.
this is as a woman who makes money, right? I hated that. That was a thing. See, this I told you before when we talked on the phone, I was like, I don't I'm like scared to imply like who I I think if you're coaching a guy about game, I think it's safe to say that's objectively unattractive.
Yeah.
No matter what's reasonable or not. I think it's objectively unattractive, and you can use that to your advantage.
And people look, and people like they're relieved when you do it. When you say, "No, I'm taking the bill. I'm doing it. Paying for it." And if they feel guilty about it, you say, "Well, you can get it next time." You know, you can take me out someplace and you can get it next time.
Really clever.
Well, you give everybody a chance to win. Like,
Yeah.
everybody gets to feel like everybody gets to give and everybody gets to receive. So it creates much better good feelings. And I think also as a guy, like it shows you don't have scarcity. Like guys talk about this stuff, and I understand that it's a hard economy out there. I don't want to like,
Oh my God. Yes, you do. You literally like owe all this money to the government right now.
I don't have.
Justified to have this opinion.
It's but I'm all right. You know what I mean? I'm still better off most other people. That's what I mean. Like I've been very blessed with the support that I've had from people. But I really think to a certain extent, like if you're not capable of taking a girl out on a date and paying for it, and the possibility that that money is going to be a sunk cost, it's not going to work out, didn't work. If you can't handle that, I'm just almost like, man, like you're just not ready to be dating. Like if you have that kind of insecurity around the money, like you don't have to take her to a fancy place. We're not saying that you have to take her to some place that's gonna like break the bank, but if you can't put yourself out there and just say, well, I'm the man, I'm paying, you know. And this is different, by the way, than because there was like in the old pickup space, there was this whole thing about like a girl asks you to buy her a drink, don't buy her a drink. And I agree with that mostly. I mean, there's always situations, right? But I agree with that mostly because she's trying, that's like manipulative, she's trying to say, oh, well, I'll talk to you if you get me a drink. You know what I mean? But that's only because of the way she went about it. Like buying people drinks. When I went out, when I was a single guy going out, even when I would buy drinks for everybody. Buy drinks for people all the time. Because it's just like you're
like a
the whole point here is
expression.
like you want to create the energy. Like
Yeah.
I don't think guys get this. Like women are really looking for energy of abundance from a guy. Like they're always looking for a guy's energy. But and when it comes to money, like they think, well, women like money. Women like potential energy that money stores.
We like you to give us an experience, and that can be a small moment, and it can cost nothing, or it can cost a lot. But like the fundamental is what you're talking about, which is like you wanted to get people drinks. Like I can relate to that even socially. Like, oh my God, because it feels like I'm giving you a good experience with me, or like I'm gonna be the reason you have a good experience.
Yeah. It's you want to be like a guy who has money. If he's just holding on to the money and he's like, yeah, I'm getting money. Look at all this money I have, but he's not creating experiences for people with it. He's not making things happen with it. It's not flowing. It's not really that attractive to women. It certainly doesn't create desire in them. And I think guys don't understand that. Like women like to see money move through a guy. Like he gets it, he spends it. Like it's the carefree attitude of a man when it comes to money without being irresponsible, right? The irresponsible stuff affects maybe the comfort side of it, but the carefree ability for a guy to spend money saying, oh, that that bottle of wine's great, we're getting that one. Oh, but it's, that doesn't matter, we're getting that one. Or, you want to get the caviar, we're getting that. You know what I mean? Like,
I think back in the day, they didn't have to deal with all these different like social iterations of situations and everybody fearing being taken advantage of and like going to the club and like jogging drinks or whatever it is. Or like, so maybe.
And I think guys didn't care about it as much because they enjoyed and appreciated the experience of being the guy who did that, because you can see it draws women towards you.
Yeah, exactly. And now it's kind of there's another layer onto it where they might not actually be enjoying the experience. Maybe they're just like perform really spend expensive things online, or
Yeah.
maybe they would enjoy the experience if they didn't feel like they saw some clip online of like the woman might be taking advantage of you, be a gold digger. I think there's so much stimulus now that can keep you from just like even being able to enjoy an experience or even know if you would or want to. Like people can't even feel like they make that choice. Because I also know, and I'm sure you've met. I know really successful guys with a lot of money who spend it poorly and aren't enjoying themselves. And I also know people who don't even make much money, but they couldn't authentically enjoy themselves. And I also know people who would enjoy themselves, but there's so much social negative and positive reinforcement that they don't seem or feel or navigate free to do what that would even imply, because it might imply the wrong thing or whatever it is in the social situation. Just to tie it back to the modern thing again. Now
our theme here. Let's see. Is there anything that we didn't cover that we want to cover here? We talked about. Oh yeah. So Okay. So I want to talk about, there's one thing I wanted to, we didn't talk about IQ gaps.
5 p.m. is no showing. Oh, yes. All right.
Okay, so we're still rolling.
IQ gaps. Yeah, I really want to jam on that because
yeah, let's talk about IQ gaps a little bit here. So, because, you know, when you look at hypergamy, which is that, you know, women date across and up, right? That's the whole, you know, parameters of hypergamy. And so then, accordingly speaking, men are only going to date across and down in any kind of dominance trait, let's put it that way, which I guess intelligence could be. I wrote about this a long time ago, and I still pretty much stand by what I say, which is I think that really what you want, if you want to be more intelligent than the woman you're with, you only want to be like a little bit more intelligent than the woman you're with, and more than just a little bit. Like the cost of it, in my opinion, are a lot higher than the purported benefits. Now, I get the whole thing that when you have, I feel like you're an intelligent guy and you have a woman who is, you know, she's sweet, she's simple. I think in some ways, a lot of those women can be more naturally able to just be, you know, do that belly full, balls empty kind of attitude, because it's, you know, they don't have other things to tie their ego to. It's like, well, I know I can do this. And, you know, and the guy's like, wow, you know what? Yeah.
That's a good way to word it. No, nothing else to tie your ego to. Because I have toyed with the concept of like, okay, in the scenario that somebody decides to date in that way with that lack of proximity IQ wise, then what is the solution? Is it like outsourcing it? Because like, I mean, you're talking from the man's perspective. I'm speaking as a decently smart chick. I've dated like guys I can't have that with. So then I'm like, but I like them and I really want this to be the one. So then I'm like outsourcing it to like my work and my hobbies and blah, blah. But then it's like, is that okay? Like, is that a good, I don't think that's, I think that's kind of might be a deal breaker, right? Because it's, then you create this world and this atmosphere and this like chapter that you're writing together where you are compensating for not being able to like vibe on that level.
And I think we have to distinguish between, you know, like education and intelligence too. I have, there's a girl I know, a friend of mine, absolutely brilliant, like super, super intelligent, far more intelligent than me. Like she's really spectacular mind. But the guy that she married was like a military guy. And that doesn't mean that a military guy, it doesn't mean he's not a dumb guy. You know what I mean? But he's more of like a physical, hands-on kind of person versus like she's very like intellectual, you know, multiple degrees from the top schools in the country. So how did they click together? I mean, he's certainly not stupid. So he's able to like have a lot of conversation, you know what I mean? Like they have conversations. And so I think that some of this is like, he didn't have her education level, but it's not like he was dumb, but there was a comparative advantage in that I think he was more like physically or visceral, more of like a man, which balanced her out. And so some ways she wanted that. So I don't know whether certain conversations she can't have with him because like either due to lack of interest or whatever. I don't know the details of that when it comes to their relationship, but
I think that makes a lot of sense, not only from my experience but others, because it's almost a different kind of proficiency.
Yeah.
Right. Like I can read a book, like the woman who can read the book, and like spit out all these, and then the man who's like might not be able to talk to you about these topics and delve into your interest in that way, but is it physically proficient and can like build things or whatever it is, or fight or whatever it is. And then that's interesting because like in the Venn diagram, like you have things that are separate that you can kind of like appreciate about each other that you can't relate to. So then that kind of speaks to like, where does the overlap need to be and what helps it be just kind of like appreciative of each other, like, wow, is a different thing. It just goes back to respect.
Yeah. it does, and I think, but I think when it comes to like from the guy's perspective of it, because I do think that women, like I've been told by a lot of different women that what they liked about me was that I was so smart. Like that was attractive to them. So I know that for a lot of women, and I think women kind of choose their criteria of like, you know, where's the dominance in the male from. I think that generally intelligent women are going to also appreciate a guy who has that, because you know they want to be able to have conversations, they want to be able, they can tell, they're intelligent enough to know that the intelligence matters, you know what I mean? It's
Yeah, it's
uh,
a very subliminal version of frame. And you're
yeah,
a really good example of that, because it feels like, you know, in all of your interactions or the way you're navigating things, like that's always kind of there. And if you
yeah,
feel like that is like that's like a like something that you can count on, or that is like holding it down, like that's it's like this invisible frame thing. And it's also, remember, girls just want to have fun,
yeah, they want
right?
to have
Stimulating. So it's like, wow, I don't know what you're talking about. You're talking about, they have that like meme now, like the Roman Empire. Like you so are that
fun.
meme.
Yeah, oh my god, oh my god, that is like my life, you know, like I'm like redrawing the borders of like post World War One Europe, you know. Like
I'm like, I have no idea about history.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
no,
Yeah.
that's, but having dated women who I would say are, you know, comparable intelligence, and women who, you know, I would say are not stupid, but not, you know, more like average intelligence. It creates a, I think that both relationships can succeed for a guy, but as a guy, I think it really depends on what you want. When you're dealing with a woman who is not um on your level from an intelligence standpoint, it becomes much more of a paternalistic dynamic.
Mhm.
Like that you run so many circles around that woman in terms of what's going on, that like I almost view it, and some guys really like this, they want this relationship because that's all that they want from a woman in their life. They want belly full, balls empty. They want the arm candy, they want sweet and feminine, and they don't care about anything else. And fair enough to them. Fair enough to them. I personally consider that more of like a concubine sort of dynamic. It's not, it's something that I think you can have a lot of affection for a woman, but I don't
Yeah.
think that you can love her in the same sense as like soulmate or partner. You know what I mean? Somebody who you like, you really feel like you're going through life with. Because I don't want to say that it's like it's that you're disrespecting them, but there isn't the same level of respect there between you and her. Like my wife isn't like an intellectual person. She's not like curious about all the kind of same stuff that I'm curious about, although she's not like a not curious person. It's just, you know, it's not like we're going and we're having like these like crazy intellectual conversations. Like that's not our relationship. But she's very intelligent. And so I can bring things up and I can talk about stuff, and she can track what I'm saying, and she can ask good
You can
questions.
get it even if she's not interested in it of her own volition.
Yeah, it's just because it's not her interest. It's not
See,
because
that's
she lacks
that's
the
a good baseline though,
capacity.
because you can still
And
be you out loud and it can land.
what's that? Say that again.
I think that's an important distinction right there that I'm gonna interrupt you for, is
Yeah,
because
yeah,
if somebody doesn't share the same interest as you, but if you are able to be you and express your interest out loud and they still get it, even if they wouldn't by themselves jam on it or pay attention to it or be interested in it, that is that we could call that like maybe a baseline.
yeah. I mean, and it's not like, and I think it's one of those things also that when you feel understood, like when the relationship is firing on all cylinders, like you're still gonna have those kind of conversations. She's gonna be interested because she wants to be connected to you, even if it's not
Right.
like, you know, and it's similar for me with her. Like there's things, you know, that she's interested in that aren't necessarily huge with me, but I like, but because I'm just kind of curious in general, like, oh, you're about this, I'll like try to find some stuff out and bring it up to her, you know. But so but there's not, but the IQ differential between my wife and I is not, it's not like if there is a differential, you know, she's a very intelligent person. And from a perspective of like a wife, to me, that's very important, because I don't know. I mean, it's like you have to spend your life talking to somebody. You know what I mean? Like you can't,
Yeah.
if you can't. I've dated girls where like there's an ego validation that you get from being like so above where they're at, and they know it. But then it's also just like, but what am I? You know, every conversation has to be, everything has to be silly, and can I depend on this person down the line with kids? Can I depend on them to like take care of things? Like when I went to prison for a year, I didn't have to worry about my life falling apart, because my wife, even though she wasn't inclined to take on, you know, financial management and stuff like that, she's
Right.
perfectly capable of doing it,
Yeah.
and she did it.
Oh,
You know,
yes.
like there's a whole thing, like, you know, stupid people are bad at every job, and I think the same thing is true for a wife. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
I think if you have, I don't know. I really value intelligence in women. I really, really value it. And I think that, you know, your flirting goes a lot further of a way when you're dealing with an intelligent woman and you're an intelligent guy, because there's like a subtle layer of the humor that is able to be understood that
Humor.
otherwise isn't.
Yes, humor is such a place to like align with somebody on that you can laugh about the same things. I tweeted about this before too. I was like, I think you have to share certain realities to be able to humorous, which has been like something that's really been both very controversial in my
Mm,
work life. I'm surrounded by a bunch of men all the time, and I can laugh in a very misogynistic way
yeah.
just because of this like my weird interest in like the man perspective and all this shit. But I'm also like I'll make those jokes just when I'm with girls.
Yeah.
And I don't exclude myself from the joke. Like I don't think that, I'm like these chicks, chicks love this. Da, da. And but so it's interesting because it's like that, that does lead to like bonding with the bros at work. Like we'll laugh, but then it's like I also have the feminine things that you can laugh about in this world. But that all of that is to say, if we're talking in a romantic context and there are jokes you make about, for example, oh, this is a funny one. Like, make a joke about normies, and I have so many normie friends.
Yeah.
Or make a joke about like the online business, or make the joke about a cultural reference. Maybe your wife's parents are from XYZ, whatever, and the American like jokes or whatever it is. Like, you have to share realities to be able to laugh together,
Yes.
like major. And I think that's a really underrated thing to look for.
Yeah. And if they can't understand your reality, then, you know, it's just, you're always going to have, there's going to be part of the relationship is you're going to lose a depth to it. And I think this is, and there's a lot of conversations in topics that, you know, it's going to be my guy friends that like those are the guys who I'm going to be able to have these kind of conversations with. And I don't need to make my wife have like every single same conversation that I can have with my guy
Right.
friends. I don't need to do it, but just knowing that I can, and it's not going to be like, what, you know, like that's a nice thing to have. Because it makes you feel, you know, you don't feel misunderstood. The other thing I'd say also is that when you have more intelligent people, you know, when you have a more intelligent woman, like you're able to get through issues and grow. I think that like you're able to grow in a relationship so much more because you have more of the self-awareness to be able to understand what's going on and to correct, like, and like that's one of the great things that's underrated about intelligence, is that it allows you to figure out exactly where the, like, that you do have a problem. So if you can see it, then you can solve it. Whereas a lot of other people, you know, you just can't do it. You're almost like, the lower you go, the more you're just kind of walking through life, sleepwalking through life, and you can't change. And if you were given a pattern, you're going to repeat that pattern for the rest of your life because you can't see it. So that's part of it as well. Like you can actually resolve issues a lot better, generally speaking, with an intelligent woman, because she's able to track the problems that are going on, and isn't just going to get caught like somewhere in her hindbrain. You know what I mean? And I think the final thing I'd say is that it just makes a more dynamic relationship in general. And this might be a good way to kind of like come to the close of this, because it's almost like as you're almost allowed to, like, you have more choice. You know, it's like when you're able to see more, you have more choice. So you're able to say, well, this works for us, this doesn't work for us. This works for me, this doesn't work for me. And so like the relationship's able to not only evolve, but like you don't have to be 100% confined. And I'll just give an example of this. There's one thing that is like so not gender normed in my relationship with my wife. And you know, it's not anything weird. It's I'm like a big gardener. Like I love
Cool.
being out with I love flower cultivation, and I love the whole process of like designing and growing gardens and tending gardens. And I do not give a shit about mechanical stuff. Like I don't care about putting things together. I can do it. I don't like doing it. And my wife likes doing it. Like you get like get like the grill. Like she wants to put the grill together. And early in the
Well, you
relationship,
you told me about this on our first conversation, the
yeah,
grill. You didn't tell me about the garden. That's like a cosmic irony, and it's we also have to remember that, like, it's just life is full of irony,
yeah.
right? You like you help men with their masculinity to like date and find their woman, and then you have this dynamic where that's like a punchline, and like it's like, oh, isn't that funny? But like,
She she got me for Christmas this like you know, like a dash cam for the car, like, you know, in case like, yeah, accidents and stuff
oh
like
yeah, yeah.
that. And I'm like, cool, like you set it up. Like I'm not setting this up. Like I don't
Yeah.
want, like I know you got it for yourself. I know you wanted to put it together. You know what I mean? You like this new gadget. You got this. I don't care about gadgets. Like
I want to
I'll get the snow off the car with my hands. You know what I mean? Like I won't even use like the broom. Um,
I want to talk. Before I forget, and I want to like wrap it up and final landing place with you too. But what you just said about the whole like intelligence and letting that dynamic evolve. I think if we were to say something practical for the front end of that, where like what before people have let this whole organic process and this great relational dynamic bloom, it's like you kept narrating without saying it, like you kept checking in. Like you have to be aware of what's going on, because I think that also smart people can have I've posted before, I really believe that like emotional awareness or emotional intelligence, or just being like in touch with your feelings, can get in the way of your intelligence. Because I can there can also be people who are on roles where like smart when they're
yeah,
doing this, but then in the dating, I mean, because so much emotions get like come up and down when you're dating somebody or in a relationship with them or whatever it is, that it can like take you out of that. So then you're not thinking. So unless you have some sort of form of check-in, whether you're working with Pat Stedman or you're like actually like, hey, with myself, or with journaling or taking a walk or whatever it is, like some version of check-in, I think can really, make that difference of letting the dynamic evolve to where it is, or it just falls flat because everything's getting so muddied. Even smart people, as you have seen in your work, right? Like they're not thinking about what's actually happening, and sometimes it can be as simple as you just saying this is happening, and it's like, oh, you know.
yeah. No, and I also think it's important to emphasize that, you know, when we're talking about smart women, it, it doesn't just because someone's more intelligent, yeah, it doesn't mean that they're more emotionally regulated. I think intelligence really swings in multiple directions with this, because I think a lot of intelligent people are extremely neurotic because they're able to like overanalyze and over rationalize so many different things that they do. So it there is like the emotional dysfunction aspect of it, and an intelligent woman is still a woman. She's still responding to the same inputs that in many ways. I think to speak to what I'm sure a lot of guys, when they have their issues with intelligent women, is that I think intelligent women are often a lot more difficult to handle because they're more complicated, in the sense that not that they aren't still women at their core, but there's so much more like they're like a woman who doesn't have all these things that she can imagine about us. You know what I mean? Like she's not as simple. Like,
Yeah, I agree. I struggle. Honestly, I really struggle with that. I think there's so many deviations from what you can form an understanding of a woman as a species.
yeah.
That there has to be almost like so many like footnotes.
Yeah. And so I think the reason that I'm still very pro the intelligent woman is because I think it increases your own satisfaction long term if you get it right. And I think that I like potential, like, because I'm an optimist. I
Mm,
don't I don't usually focus on the downside potential, like as you maybe see as it happened to me recently. I don't think about what as much what could go wrong as I do what could go right, because I trust myself to be able to navigate anything that goes wrong.
yeah.
Um, and I probably should be, and I'm getting better at this of focusing on like downside risk
No,
for
I literally just had this conversation walking out across the street in Fort Lauderdale with some people that I'm like just getting to know me, and I'm like, listen, and we kept running into this point where they'd be like, well, what if this? What are we doing this? What? And I was like, listen, you guys know what we're doing, because like I don't really have a level of a healthy level of fear. I'm like, oh, wherever I arrive, I'll just figure it out. And I've collected way too much positive validation in my entire life to probably expect myself to change that. So I'm curious, because that resonates so specifically with something that happened recently. Why do you feel incentivized to pay more attention to that?
to the positive.
No, to the what to the opposite of your nature.
Well, I just think it's a balance. It's balance. You want to try to get some degree of balance in your personality. I mean, I'm always going to be an optimist. Don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to say that like I'm going to become a healthy dose of pessimist. I don't want to be like ambivalent about whether the glass is half
Yeah,
full or
yeah,
half empty.
yeah, yeah,
But
yeah. Okay, that's a good answer.
you know, for instance, I'll just give a really clear example, like January 6th, right?
Mm.
Um, you know, there's no question that I was like, I had a lot of zeal and I wasn't paying enough attention to kind of, you know, what bad thing could come of this. Like there was a lack of prudence, and I think prudence is a necessary trait. You know, it's wisdom. It's a necessary trait for, you know, somebody to really hit their pinnacle. Like I had courage, but a lot of courageous people get killed because they they go too far. They don't realize that they're about to step on a landmine. I mean, so it's just having, you know, you do want to understand, and I think that to bring this to a dating dynamic, having awareness that, and I do this with clients, like you need to understand if a woman is really bad news. Like there's a certain point where it just becomes wishful thinking, where it's not that you're simply like doing risk mitigation. You're like, you're in denial about the fact that you're trying to fix something that can't be fixed. But the optimist in me, I would rather be with a woman who I know that we can really create something incredible together, rather than, you know, settle for, well, like she's pretty and she doesn't give me that much trouble. Like I don't know. And maybe it's because I think that most men really in their soul, especially if they're men who like challenges, kind of like a little bit of trouble from a woman. You know what I mean? Like not like a lot of trouble, but like enough of like a challenge. They don't want like a parasitic kind of trouble where it's just like
Yeah.
drama, pointless drama for the sake of drama. But I mean,
You guys like to feel like you earned something, and without
yeah,
trying,
that's a great way to put
me
it. Feel like you
me
earned something.
validating that is not meant to imply that everybody like play hard to get and be difficult, blah, blah, blah. But yeah, like just fundamentally, it's like, oh, I achieved this. It wasn't just like a given to me.
Yeah. And there's just so many more layers to it as a result of, you know, that deeper, that broader connection. I don't know. So yeah, that's
I know.
that's
I
my
tell you, this is how it's just like go off on the. That was like we should pick some specific things to focus on. I'm like, it's just gonna bust wide open.
No, it's good though. I think that we really, I mean, I think we really hit it. I think we really hit the different. The
Good.
one thing I just say is that,
I
and I
want to
want to
add one thing to what you just said about the bad. You know, if you said something along the lines about like making a call if somebody's not a bad if they're not a good woman. You said something. What did you just say? I want to point something there in terms of insight with women in a behind the scenes all female dynamic. And I've taken this risk a million times, which has been really bad. Like if we're talking prudence, if like the female, and this is gonna be in trouble, but the female atmosphere of a female behind the scenes social dynamic, there's challenge, but there's not real challenge. It is a social risk for you to stand up for. It's more of a social risk. Actually, I guess it's the same for guys. Say, for example, a woman's not being like a solid woman to be like providing for or whatever we were just talking about, and behind the scenes, this is like noticed. I think also for men, but I'm gonna speak from the woman's perspective. To shift the dynamic of like whether you were actually like, if you're going to be you might need to be, I mean, the guy just really has to take the responsibility of being the negative reinforcement, even if it's not, explicit, right? Because if say a guy is like interested in a woman who's like really just likes his attention and is just stringing him along, or just like his money or whatever it is, and she doesn't really she doesn't really care about him or interested in him, doesn't have any respect for him, then that woman is coming from an atmosphere where she's positively validated for it somewhere, right? Maybe it's like from early like root things, maybe it's in the social thing, maybe both, but there's no there's not, it's not just her versus you to be against that and change that.
She's gonna
There's
find that
so
positive
much
validation elsewhere. Yeah.
Yes, and if there's hypothetically ever another energy in the thing that agrees with that, it's a huge social risk for them to be like, yo, this XYZ. So I think it's really, really, really important
That
that
is such a great point for guys to keep in mind. Is that, yeah, you're not just dealing with your woman, you're dealing with the entire environment around her. And, hopefully she's got like good influences around her, but sad reality is that a lot don't today. They don't have good influences. And I think that really underlines that you want to guide her, but you don't want to guide her in a way that like really brings her down.
Yeah.
And I think so much of this is really being in truth. Does that mean that every woman, like some women are really, they're not good people, they're deceitful people, right? Men and women are both like that. We have bad eggs. And when you engage in the truth with them, even if you do care about them, even if the love is clear, if the truth goes against their ego, they're gonna go elsewhere to get the validation.
Yes.
And I think when you have a consistent problem like that in a relationship, you have to be willing to consider whether you just want to cut the loss with that person, because that's somebody who I don't think is operating in good faith. And I also say that they're really like, they care more about, they have an aversion towards truth and like things actually getting better. So the relationship for them is a big ego gratification. And if you're a growth oriented person, if you want something really like a real connection, you can't coexist in that kind of dynamic. And that's one of the reasons why, even though I'm a Christian and I respect this position, like I'm not anti-divorce. I think that sometimes I mean, I've just seen too many scenarios where it's like it's so obviously necessary. Do I think it's abused? 100%.
Yes.
I think way more people do it than they should because they lack the
It's like a
proper
plan B
support.
for a commitment that's supposed to be
Yeah.
lifelong.
But I mean, I've worked with clients and it's like, yeah, you married a woman who is evil. Like when you're supposed to just stay with her. Like I don't understand this like line of thinking. But anyway,
And as a nuanced alternative to just exiting and don't deal with that, I think that at bare minimum, and I've implemented this too, even with addressing a disrespectful dynamic, right? Say somebody's forming new boundaries. Then at least, hey, this is how we've moved forward up until this point, how the dynamic has been, and you've been a toxic piece of shit or whatever is happening. And this is how I'm going to be moving forward. And this is what you in that dynamic would look like with me moving forward. So that if it doesn't work for you, like we have to like not move forward together.
Yeah.
Right. Which I think happens in the dating context a lot too, because people are just like really, really, really like each other at the beginning and putting up with all the shit on both sides. And I've been in an odd number of situations where both sides come, like even not in professional, like just in the world. And I'm like, if everything was clearer and somebody was willing to address the dynamic, maybe it would have a potential to change. But something is being perpetuated over here that's not good. And then this person is not even giving that person an opportunity to like rise to the occasion out of that. Oh, or they just need to be like, screw this, bye. But I almost feel like there's a passing phase where like, and maybe that's a possibility thing, but like that, like if people would just confront shit, like maybe it does alchemize, and maybe you can, like maybe you are the reason somebody changes at that pivot point in their life.
Yeah, no, it definitely happens. It definitely happens, and I do think, you know, relationships are really hard when you have people in their ego, and I think that, you know, this is a conversation that we may get into on like another show, but they're really hard when you're in your ego, and they're a lot easier when you both have been humbled to a certain extent. And when you like, the more trust there is, the easier it is to solve problems. And it's really hard to have strong trust in a relationship when there's two egos operating, because egos are selfish. So, you know, how are you actually, you know, working for the other person if you're working for yourself like that?
Yeah.
So,
and the situation just has to break it down because it's too egoic.
yeah. So anyway, I think this is a good place to end it, Trina. People have been with us for almost an hour and a half here. We'll
how do you feel about the first one? What should we tell them to expect from the following? We're gonna be more concise?
I think we'll be shorter. I have some topics. I mean, I definitely want to talk about like sex and stuff. I think sex is like a great topic, and it's also a great topic to hear this stuff coming from a woman.
Yeah,
because I just see
women who aren't like hoeing it up don't talk about sex.
Yeah, and I just I think that there is so much. I have seen in the manosphere over time this tendency for like narratives to kind of become accepted as fact because they've just been spread a lot, and that they were never true. And I'm just going to give you an example of this because I do want to talk about all this stuff when they do the next show on sex. But just to give you an example of something that the manosphere was saying for like, you still hear it sometimes, actually. You still hear it sometimes, but like for a decade straight, it was going on. And that was that women don't care about a man's looks. Women only care about a man's, you know, like how like the game that a guy has. It's all about game, right? That was amazing marketing. It was a complete lie. Absolute complete lie. I mean, women definitely care about a guy's looks. Now I understand there's a lot of different roads to success, but you know, you can just see it objectively in the market. You can see it objectively in the market that, you know, if a guy's handsome, if he's in good shape, he's going to have it a lot easier than a guy, you know, who isn't. So
100%. That's a really interesting take. Unfortunately, my brain went straight to, in what scenarios would that not be true? And then I'm thinking of like a friend who would stay with this guy that she wasn't really attracted to, was kind of embarrassed. I feel so guilty like saying all these anecdotes, but at the same time I want to say them. Socially was kind of embarrassed to be with him because he wasn't that attractive, but they were having great sex. So she kept seeing him. But girls, 100%. It's like objectively true. You can't. No.
Yeah, but that was said for a while. Like, doesn't matter if you're like fat, short, middle-aged guy. Like,
is the aim of that to like hype up? Well,
you're
actually,
gonna get like hot 20-year-old models if you just do this one weird trick.
Don't you fundamentally agree with where that's coming from? Because you can't also have anybody who's not attractive give up.
No, you're right. I mean, it was great marketing. Fair. It was great marketing, and it wasn't incorrect for those people to hear, right? Because, and this is like a whole, it's a whole other topic.
We need a, sorry.
But no, but like men are unfortunate in the fact that they have to work to earn almost everything in terms of their value in the market. But they're blessed in that they can, you know, like I think it's unfortunate for women, but women are given much more like a preset value, that it's more of a matter of like, don't lose it. You know what I mean? They can increase their value in some ways, but it's not to the same extent as guys. And the great thing is that if you are, you know, if you are like a short guy, like there's no way that you can't get like a great, beautiful woman. There's different ways to win, but it's also a lie to say that, you know, you're not going to have a harder time. It's just objectively true. And those guys know it from their own experience, but I guess it was, you know, it's it's good marketing anyway.
Height comes up all the time from both guys and girls that I know, all the time. Never stops coming up. Height. Yeah, it's never stops coming up. Very interesting. That we'll have plenty to talk about there.
Yeah. All right, Trina. Well, look,
Okay.
it's been real, and we'll be back on in a couple weeks.
Sounds good. Thanks, Pat.
Yep.